And welcome to the interview on France 24. My guest is known around the world as one of the key architects of the European single currency, a former president of the European Central Bank. Jean-Claude Trichet is joining me on the interview. Thank you very much, Mr. Trichet, for being with us. You're taking part in our special series of debates on the upcoming European elections. I add that you currently serve as the chair of the board of the influential think tank, the Bruegel Institute, so your focus really remains Europe. Mr. Trichet, you know there will be key European elections from the 22nd to the 25th of May. An increasing number of Europeans are disillusioned. They don't believe in Europe anymore. This year, the turnout, we're being told, might be even lower than last time. That means even less than 40%. What is your main message to all these Europeans who tell you it doesn't make sense for me to go to the polls on the 25th of May?
Well, first, thank you very much for your invitation. I would say that first of all, we don't know what will be the turnout. It depends on all sensitivities, all political sensitivities, all over Europe, of course, and of the lively debate that we will have, I'm sure. And I would only say myself, based on my own experience, that the European Parliament is extremely important. It's a very, very powerful body which has the responsibility to sign all legislation in Europe, and all legislation in Europe means a lot of legislation in each nation. So it's a very, very important body, which is elected by universal polling, so has the democratic legitimacy, which is so essential. And you know that one of the criticism on Europe is that it is good, it has done a lot of, I would say, excellent work in order to preserve peace, to preserve stability, and to preserve all Europe as we like it, namely a united Europe. But it is absolutely clear also that one of the remarks which is generally made is that democratic legitimacy is insufficient. Then we have the European Parliament. We can all elect our MPs. They have the democratic legitimacy.
Jean-Claude Trichet, anti-EU parties are poised to do very well in the upcoming elections. Here in France, if I look at the polls, the Front National, which is very much anti-EU, even anti-Euro, anti-single currency, are, well, if you believe this poll, could welcome second in the election just after the centre-right UMP. Who's responsible for this?
Well, first of all, let me say that a central bank, and I am the former president of the European Central Bank, issue the currency for all political sensitivities, for all the people, for absolutely everybody. And it seems to me that the rejection of Europe that some are, observing in the survey corresponds to a more general unsatisfaction with what has happened during the recent period, because we had to go through a crisis of the advanced economy, not only of Europe, of the US, of Japan, of the UK, of all advanced economy. And we have to make our people understand that without Europe, we would have had really terrible moments. So Europe played a very important role also in the recent period, even if the recent period has been difficult everywhere, in Japan, in the US, and in Europe.
So when Europeans are telling you we are suffering today because the euro is overvalued, because of all the bailout plans, and that's our problem, you will tell them that it's not true.
No, I would tell them it's certainly not true, because you would have to look at what would have happened if the euro would not have existed. And then you would have generalization of crisis everywhere in all countries. There we had some countries in major difficulty because they had not behaved properly before, euro or not euro. Those who were behaving very properly within the euro framework have been rewarded. And so it's not the euro which is at stake. It's certainly not Europe which is at stake. It is to apply by the rules. And I think that it is what is recognized if you look again at what has happened. But I would say more than that. I would say you have to replace the European construction within the framework of long-term history. Since the start of the European construction, the speech that were delivered by Robert Schuman in year 1950, we had peace, we had stability, we had prosperity all over Europe, and it triggered the reunification of Europe. When you look at the way the Ukrainians are looking at us, or the Baltic states are looking at us, it's clearly they recognize that this historical endeavor has been absolutely fundamental for their own liberty, for their own capacity to develop and grow.
After years of stagnation, the Eurozone is showing signs of recovery. How strong is this recovery?
Well, we have a recovery which must be deepened and activated in the most, I would say, active fashion. What we have today is the fortunate end of the very difficult adjustment period of the 5 countries that were under stress in the crisis, namely Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and also Italy. And these countries now are in a situation where they can be in the positive figures again, after having been heavily negative. The north of Europe, which was very prosperous, obviously, before the crisis, sustained the crisis quite well, has room for maneuvering to grow much faster. And I expect that by all means, all possible channels, including confidence channel, we will see both, I would say, a modest growth in the country that were under stress, but positive, and a more buoyant growth in the countries that have room for maneuvering, obviously.
And right in the middle, it's your home country, France, described by many as the new sick man of Europe. Is it also your assessment?
I beware of the qualification. You know, during my first 4 years as president of the ECB, I was told in such a dialogue as we have today, Germany being the sick man of Europe, how can you run the euro area with the biggest country being the sick man? And I was saying, no, they are not the sick man. They are working on themselves to regain competitiveness because reunification made the German economy having lost a lot of competitiveness. And now I would say the same. France has lost competitiveness, has to work on its own competitiveness, cost competitiveness, and all kind of competitiveness in order to regain the capacity to grow faster and to create jobs much faster.
Is the French government doing enough in order to regain this competitiveness?
Well, I would only say that what counts is the diagnosis, one, and the action, two. As far as the diagnosis is concerned, it seems to me that there is now a consensus in France to consider that we have to regain cost competitiveness, which has been lost, that we have to diminish public spendings, which are too high, much too high, and that we have to unleash the various markets, including the labor market. And that will create jobs. And the problem of this country, as many in the advanced economy, is to create jobs as actively as possible. So we will see. As I said, you have the diagnosis and you have to deliver. And we will see the delivery now.
You know the French better than me. Do you believe that they are ready to make these sacrifices? They're ready to make these bold reforms?
What you call sacrifices are not sacrifices. They are the right way to create jobs and to diminish the mass unemployment, which is unacceptable. France did that on a multi-partisan basis, a bipartisan consensus, in the time of what we called the competitive disinflation in the 80s and the 90s. And it worked. Year after year, we regained competitiveness. And at the end of the day, at the moment of the start of the euro, we had a current account surplus. Germany had a current account deficit. We were creating jobs, and we had an unemployment lower than the German unemployment. I would say now, the German, of course, did a very good job since the setting up of the euro, and we see the results now, particularly as regards unemployment. We have to get back, if I may, to the so-called competitive policy of the 80s and 90s. I would call that a competitive stability policy, but it has to be done year after year, not only with an early shock, which is necessary, but doesn't solve all problems. You have to embark in this policy to get jobs and diminish unemployment.
And that where it brings me back to Europe this week. The French president addressed the nation following the debacle in the local elections, and he hinted very clearly that France might need more time to meet its budget deficit reduction targets with Brussels. What the French president is saying, basically, we need a bit of breathing space. Does he have a valid argument?
Well, I will not interpret what has been said by the president and by the government. You will not expect from the previous former president of the ECB anything but what I have always said, namely, we have a pact, the Stability and Growth Pact. It is our rule, and we have commitments, and I expect, of course, the rule to be applied and the commitments to be respected, because it's a major question of confidence.
You started by telling me how important these elections will be. You know, this year there is a major change because all the big political groups have chosen a candidate, a single candidate, to represent their party across Europe. Martin Schulz will represent the Socialists. Jean-Claude Juncker will represent the centre-right European People's Party. Is this a game changer to make these elections truly European?
Again, they are already truly European, even if in the past it was not perceived. I have to say that it's extremely important that we all realize to which extent the power of the parliament, the budgetary power of the parliament, the political power of the parliament, because at the end of the day, it is the parliament which will elect the president of the commission. And I would also say that for all new legislation, practically all, the Parliament has a key. So, we are now already for the European legislation with the upper chamber and the lower chamber. The upper chamber is the Council, the various governments of Europe, and the lower chamber is the Parliament, which we will elect in a few weeks. And it is extremely important. They are elected by all of us.
Jean-Claude Trichet, I remind our viewers, but I don't need to remind them that, of course, you are the former president of the European Central Bank. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview on France 24. Please stay with us for more news on our channel.